On the hunt for two gunmen seen on surveillance video pumping bullets into a parked car. Inside that car was a mom pregnant with her second child.
She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was sitting right outside her own home. Inside her car, the engine still warm, everything felt normal. Just moments earlier, her niece had been right there beside her, talking, laughing, until she stepped out and walked inside for a second. Derica Patrick stayed behind. At 29 years old, she had a lot ahead of her. A 9-year-old daughter who depended on her. Another child on the way. She was pregnant, and she was safe. Or at least, she thought she was. Then a car pulled up. No loud music, no sudden movement, no warning. Two men stepped out. They didn't run, they didn't shout, they just walked straight toward her car, like they already knew exactly where they were going. No argument, no confrontation, just a quiet approach, closing the distance step by step. And in that moment, sitting outside her own home in a place she had every reason to feel safe, Derica had no idea what was about to happen next. Chicago police confirmed they have surveillance video of everything that night. Still no arrest, no named suspect, just a $15,000 reward, nobody claimed. But here's the question that still doesn't sit right. Why her? Before we go further, if you're watching right now, take a second to subscribe and let me know, where are you watching from? Derica Patrick wasn't someone people overlooked. She had a presence about her, the kind that made people feel comfortable almost instantly. If you sat in her chair, you weren't just another client. You were someone she talked to, laughed with, checked on. That was part of who she was. She grew up surrounded by family. In a home where connection mattered, she wasn't distant. Derica stayed close to her people, especially her siblings. Among them, her bond with her sister stood out the most. They weren't just related, they were connected in a way that only comes from years of shared experiences. Conversations that didn't need explaining. Moments where one look said everything. Her sister spoke about that bond, about how losing Derica didn't just feel like losing a sibling, it felt like losing a part of herself. That kind of closeness tells you something about who Derica was. She valued relationships, she showed up, and she made people feel like they mattered. Professionally, she built her life around making others feel confident. Derica worked as a hairstylist, and anyone who understands that world knows, it's more than just hair. It's trust. It's consistency. It's the reason people keep coming back, not just for the service, but for the person behind it. Clients didn't just sit in her chair and leave. They stayed connected to her. They followed her work. They recommended her. Because when someone combines skill with personality, it creates something deeper than business. It creates loyalty. And Derica had that. But beyond everything else, beyond work, beyond friendships, there was one role that defined her more than anything. She was a mother. Her 9-year-old daughter was at the center of her world. Everything she did, every plan she made, every decision she took, somehow traced back to that child. She wasn't just raising her. She was building a future for her. A stable one. A better one. And at the time her life was taken, Derica was preparing to do it all over again. She was pregnant. That detail alone changes everything, because it means she wasn't just living for the present, she was actively planning ahead, thinking about names, thinking about space, thinking about how her daughter would react to becoming a big sister. There was expectation, there was hope, and there was responsibility. Because when you look at Derica's life, the people around her, the work she did, the way she carried herself, there's no obvious reason why she would end up in a situation like this. So the question becomes unavoidable. How does someone like Derica Patrick, a young mother building her life, end up sitting in her own car outside her home and become the target of something like this? January 12, 2022, started like any other day. By the time evening came around, Derica Patrick was doing something routine, something she had likely done countless times before. She was heading home. She wasn't alone. Her niece was with her. The two had been out together, sharing what seemed like an ordinary moment. There was no tension between them, no urgency, no fear. Just a normal drive back, the kind that doesn't stay in your memory because nothing about it feels important at the time. When they arrived, Derica pulled up outside her home in Chicago's Inglewood neighborhood. It was familiar ground, a place she knew, a place she felt comfortable. a place where nothing should have gone wrong. The car came to a stop, and for a brief moment everything paused in that quiet space between arriving and stepping inside. Then came a small, almost forgettable detail. The cake. Her niece realized she needed to go inside to get it. It wasn't a big deal, just a quick trip in and out, something that would take seconds, maybe a minute at most. Derica stayed in the car. There was no reason not to. She wasn't in danger. She wasn't in a rush. She was simply waiting. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because if that one small decision had gone differently, if they had both stepped out at the same time, everything that followed might have unfolded another way. Her niece got out and headed inside, leaving Derica alone in the driver's seat. Now, to her niece. She had no reason to rush. She walked inside like she had done many times before, focused only on what she went in to get. There was no fear in her mind. No thought that anything outside required her attention. She wasn't looking back at the car. She wasn't watching the street. Because why would she? Derica was right outside. Safe. Waiting. And in that short span of time, those few seconds where everything seemed completely ordinary, something began to change outside. Not loudly. Not in a way that would immediately draw attention. But enough. Because while she was inside, a vehicle pulled up. The car didn't rush in. It didn't draw attention to itself. It simply pulled up, close enough to where Derica was parked outside her home. Inside her own car, Derica remained seated, still unaware. Then the doors opened. 2 men stepped out. No hesitation, no confusion about where they were going. They didn't look around, they didn't pause. They moved with purpose, walking directly toward her vehicle. From Derica's position, there was almost no time to process it. No time to question why they were approaching. No time to react in a way that could change what came next, because what happened next happened fast. No warning. They reached the side of her car, and then, just gunfire. Shots were fired directly into the vehicle. The sound shattered the silence of the street in an instant. The men didn't stay long. The moment they had done what they came to do, they turned and left, getting back into their vehicle and disappearing from the scene just as quickly as they had arrived. And just like that, they were gone. Inside the house, her niece heard it. The sound of gunshots doesn't blend into the background. It cuts through everything. What had been a normal, quiet moment inside suddenly turned into confusion and panic. She knew exactly where Derica was. Outside, in the car. And without thinking, she moved, rushing back toward the door. And when she got there, everything was different. The car was still there, but the stillness was gone. Derica was no longer just sitting there waiting. The moment that had felt so normal minutes earlier had turned into something no one could take back. For her niece, there was no preparing for what she was about to see. No way to process it before it happened. Only the reality of stepping outside and facing it. What she saw next would stay with her forever. Outside the car, confusion turned into urgency. People began to gather, voices overlapping, trying to make sense of what had just taken place in a matter of seconds. Someone called for help. Others stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Inside the vehicle, Derica was still there. But the moment that had begun as ordinary had already passed beyond anything that could be undone. Emergency responders arrived and moved quickly. There was no delay, no hesitation. Every second mattered now in a way it hadn't just minutes earlier. She was taken from the scene and rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, doctors did what they could. But the damage was too severe. Derica Patrick was pronounced dead. She was 29 years old, and with her, the child she was carrying was also lost. 2 lives, gone in the same moment. The shift from chaos to grief was immediate. There was no time to prepare for it, no gradual understanding, just a sudden, overwhelming reality that settled over everyone who knew her. Her mother faced a loss no parent should ever have to face. The weight of it showed in everything she said, in the way she spoke about her daughter, not as a headline, not as a case, but as her child. Someone she had raised, someone she had watched grow, someone she expected to outlive her. That expectation was gone, and in its place was grief. Her sister, the one who had shared so much of life with her, now had to process what it meant to move forward without her. The conversations, the closeness, the everyday connection, they didn't fade over time. They stopped all at once. And then there was her daughter. 9 years old. At that age, a child doesn't fully understand loss in the way adults do, but they feel it just as deeply. The absence, the change, the questions that don't have simple answers. The person who had been there every day suddenly wasn't. No goodbye, no warning, just gone. After everything that had happened, the noise, the movement, the urgency, what remained was stillness. A kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace, only reflection. Because in the end, what was left behind wasn't just a crime scene. It was a family trying to understand how something like this could happen, and how they were supposed to live with it after. In the hours that followed, attention shifted from what had happened to trying to understand why. The scene had already told part of the story. This wasn't random movement. This wasn't confusion. There was direction in the way those two men arrived. And in the way they approached her car. And that detail would become one of the most unsettling parts of this case, because there was video. Cameras in the area had captured key moments: the vehicle pulling up, the two men stepping out, and the short walk toward Derica's car. It wasn't a blur, it wasn't distant or unclear. They could be seen, walking, approaching, closing in, and what stood out immediately was how calm it all looked. No rushing, no hesitation, no second guessing. They walked up like they knew exactly who she was. That alone changed how people viewed what happened. Investigators began working through what they had. The vehicle, the route it took, the timing, every detail mattered. But even with that footage, one major problem remained. The identities of the two men were still unknown. No names, no confirmed connections, no immediate arrests. And as time passed, that gap between what was seen and what was known became harder to ignore. That's when the questions started building. Because the more people looked at the case, the less it felt like something random. Was Derica the intended target? It's a question that comes up often in cases like this, but here, it carried weight. She was sitting outside her home, in a place she was familiar with, at a time that didn't suggest risk. For someone to pull up and approach her directly like that, it raises the possibility that they knew she would be there, that they expected her. But then there's another possibility. Mistaken identity. Could they have been looking for someone else? Someone with a similar car? Someone who was expected to be in that spot? It's not the first time something like that has been considered in cases where answers are missing. But even that explanation leaves gaps, because the approach didn't look uncertain. It didn't look like they were checking. It looked direct. Then there's the question of connection. Did Derica know them? Was there something in her life, something not immediately visible, that linked her to what happened? Family members, friends, and those close to her have struggled with that idea. Because from everything known about her, there was no clear reason for her to be in that position. No obvious conflict, no known issue that pointed in this direction, which brings everything back to the same place: uncertainty. Cases like this often rely on more than just what's captured on camera. They depend on people. Someone who saw something, someone who noticed a detail, someone who recognizes a face, a car, a movement. Because even when footage exists, it doesn't always tell the whole story. And without that missing piece, the investigation slows. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the situation remained the same. No arrests, no confirmed suspects publicly identified. Just questions. Only the same moment, replaying over and over. And for the family, that part can be just as difficult as the loss itself. At this point, the question becomes unavoidable. What do you think? Was she the intended target, or was this something else? Because until that answer is clear, this story remains unfinished. There's a part of the story that stays with you long after the details fade. Not just what happened, but how it happened. Because nothing about that moment looked dangerous at first. Derica wasn't somewhere unfamiliar. She wasn't out late in a place people would question. She was right outside her own home. And that's what makes this harder to process. We tend to believe that safety is tied to location. That being close to home in a familiar space lowers the risk. That protects us. But cases like this challenge that idea. Because the truth is, violence doesn't always come with clear warning signs. That's what makes everyday moments so important. The small gaps in time. The seconds between arriving and stepping inside, the moments where nothing feels urgent. Those are the moments we don't question. And yet, in this case, that's exactly where everything changed. There's also something else that stands out. The way the situation unfolded didn't involve chaos leading up to it. It didn't involve a visible struggle before it began. It happened quickly, with very little interruption to what was already in motion. And that forces us to look at a different kind of vulnerability. Not one built on risky behavior or bad decisions, but one that exists simply because we're human, moving through routines we trust. Sitting in a car, waiting outside, taking a few extra seconds before going inside. Things we all do. But beyond the moment itself, there's the impact it leaves behind. Because when something like this happens, it doesn't end at the scene. It continues through the people connected to it. In this case, a child is left to grow up without her mother. At 9 years old, that kind of loss doesn't come with clear understanding. It shows up in questions, in changes, in moments where something feels missing but can't fully be explained, and those effects don't disappear over time. They shift, they evolve, but they remain. So what can be taken from this? Not fear, but awareness. Awareness doesn't mean expecting something bad at every moment. It means paying attention to what feels out of place, noticing when something doesn't align with what's normal in a familiar environment. It also means understanding that information matters. In situations like this, details from the community, what was seen, what was noticed, can make a difference. Even small observations can move things forward when larger pieces are missing. Because no single person sees everything. But together those fragments can build a clearer picture. And then there's the question of patterns. Not every case has a clear explanation, but the way something happens can still reveal something important. The approach, the timing, the confidence. Those elements can point toward intention, even when the full reason isn't known. And recognizing that difference between something random and something directed matters. In the end, this story doesn't just raise questions about what happened. It raises questions about how quickly things can change, even in places we trust. Because sometimes the most dangerous moments don't stand out at all. Derica Patrick sat there exactly where she was supposed to be. In a place she knew, in a space that should have been safe. Just seconds earlier, her niece had been right beside her. Then she stepped out, heading inside for something small, a detail that didn't seem important at the time. And in that short window, everything shifted. 2 men approached, no warning, no words. And the life she had been building, everything she was working toward, was cut short in a matter of seconds. It's easy to look at moments like this after the fact and search for something that could have been different. A different decision, a different timing, a different outcome. But the truth is, nothing about that moment suggested danger. And yet, what was taken wasn't just a single life, it was a future. A mother raising her 9-year-old daughter, a woman preparing to welcome another child into the world. A life that was still moving forward, still growing, still unfolding. Now that daughter will grow up carrying questions. Questions about what happened, questions about why, questions that don't always come with clear answers. Because even now, the biggest part of this story remains unresolved. No confirmed arrests, no clear explanation. Just a moment that changed everything. And the people left behind trying to make sense of it. Derica Patrick's story doesn't end with that night. It continues through her family, through her daughter, through the memories people hold on to, and through every person who hears what happened and asks the same question, why? If this story moved you in any way, take a moment to support the channel by liking this video and subscribing. It helps keep stories like Derica's from being forgotten. And I'd also like to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this case? Share this video so more people can hear her story, and so that the search for answers doesn't stop here.